Most people think software shuts down when something goes wrong. A glitch, a bug, a bad update, someone made a mistake. The screen freezes, systems stop responding, access disappears. Work halts instantly. The instinct is to look for the error, to roll something back, to restart and hope everything comes back the way it was. Downtime feels like failure because it interrupts continuity. It breaks the expectation that systems should always be available, always responsive, always on. That expectation feels reasonable. Modern life depends on it. Payments clear in seconds. Medical records load instantly. Logistics systems coordinate thousands of moving parts without visible effort. Software fades into the background until the moment it does not. When everything stops, it feels sudden and absolute. But most shutdowns do not begin with a crash. They begin with a limit. Long before anyone notices a frozen screen or a locked account, the system has been measuring itself. Error rates creeping upward, response time stretching, data drifting out of alignment. Dependencies failing in small, uneven ways. At first, nothing feels different on the outside. Requests still go through. Dashboards still update. Work continues. Inside the system, tolerance is narrowing. Modern software is not built to assume stability. It is built to assume volatility. Networks fail. Data corrupts. Services disappear without warning. Threats arrive from directions no one predicted. To survive that reality, systems are designed with rules that decide when to stop, not because stopping is desirable, because continuing can be worse. Most people encounter these rules only after they have already fired. When access is revoked, when transactions are blocked, when entire platforms go dark. From the outside, it feels like a collapse. From the inside, it feels like protection. Software systems are not asked whether they should keep running at all costs. They are asked whether they can continue without losing integrity. Is the data still trustworthy? Is the state still consistent? Is the system still safe to operate? When the answer becomes uncertain, the system does not debate. It shuts down. That shutdown is not a failure of intelligence. It is the expression of it. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do when conditions move outside acceptable bounds. This is the part people rarely see. They assume the shutdown caused the problem. In reality, the shutdown is the response. The problem is whatever pushed the system beyond what it was built to tolerate. And tolerance is not infinite. Software systems carry limits just like hospitals, power grids, and insurance models. They can absorb only so much inconsistency, delay, or risk before continuing becomes more dangerous than stopping. Those limits are encoded quietly, in thresholds, in rules, in conditions that trigger when something no longer looks right. There is no announcement when those thresholds are approached. No warning that the system is about to change how it behaves. Everything appears normal until it is not. Then suddenly, nothing works. Accounts are locked. Services are unavailable. Operations freeze. People search for the cause. They look for a person, a line of code, a bad decision. But the decision was already made. It was made when the system was designed. When engineers decided what mattered more, availability or correctness, speed or safety, continuity or containment, those decisions sit quietly in the background until the moment they take effect. This episode is about those moments, not spectacular hacks or dramatic outages, but the everyday rules embedded in software that decide when stopping is safer than continuing. We follow how systems detect risk, how thresholds turn into action, and how shutdowns protect infrastructure by exporting disruption outward. Because when software stops everything, it is rarely broken. It is enforcing a boundary. And like every boundary in modern systems, someone ends up on the wrong side of it. Part 1. Why systems are designed to stop. Modern software is not built to run forever. It is built to protect something. Data, integrity, trust, continuity over time. Those goals sound abstract until something goes wrong, until information no longer lines up, until actions cannot be reversed, until the system can no longer be sure what is true. At that point, continuing is no longer neutral. Every action taken while a system is unstable risks making the problem worse. Writing bad data, confirming transactions that should not exist, allowing access that cannot be safely revoked later. So systems are designed with limits, Not soft limits that slow things down gradually, but hard ones that stop everything at once. This can feel extreme from the outside. Why not keep going a little longer? Why not let people finish what they were doing? Why not degrade gracefully instead of shutting down completely? Those questions make sense when the cost of stopping is visible and immediate. What they miss is the cost of continuing. Software systems operate on assumptions. That data is consistent. That dependencies are available. That actions taken now will still make sense later. When those assumptions break, the system has two options. It can continue and hope the damage is manageable, or it can stop and preserve what still holds. Stopping is often the safer choice. This is why many systems are designed to fail closed rather than fail open. Access is denied rather than partially granted. Transactions are blocked rather than allowed through with uncertainty attached. From the outside, this feels unforgiving. From the inside, it is restraint. Engineers do not design shutdown rules because they expect failure. They design them because failure is inevitable. Networks partition, hardware degrades. Updates introduce conflicts. External services disappear. What matters is not whether failure occurs, but how the system responds when it does. A system that refuses to stop can destroy itself quietly. Corruption spreads. Inconsistencies multiply. Recovery becomes harder the longer the system continues in a compromised state. A system that stops early preserves a clean edge. It contains damage. It creates a clear point from which recovery can begin. This is why shutdown logic is often simple and strict. If the system cannot confirm the data is consistent, stop. If authentication cannot be verified reliably, stop. If dependencies fall below acceptable thresholds, stop. These rules are not subtle, they are binary by design. Either conditions are safe enough to proceed, or they are not. There is no middle ground where the system can guess. That lack of flexibility frustrates people who experience the shutdown. Work is interrupted, access disappears, processes freeze midstream. It feels like the system is choosing safety over people. In a sense, it is. But not because people do not matter. Because the system is responsible for more people than it can see at once. A payment platform that continues processing transactions during inconsistency risks harming thousands of users. A medical system that allows partial access risks compromising patient safety. A logistics platform that keeps moving goods based on unreliable state can create cascading failures downstream. Stopping one person from completing a task can protect many others from invisible harm. That trade is embedded in code. It is not evaluated case by case. It cannot be. The system does not know who is on the other end of the screen or how urgent their task feels. It only knows whether its internal conditions still meet the requirements it was designed to enforce. This is why shutdowns often feel disproportionate. A small error triggers a total stop. A minor anomaly leads to complete loss of access. From the system's perspective, the size of the anomaly does not matter as much as its nature. If the anomaly threatens integrity, scale becomes irrelevant. This is also why explanations often feel unsatisfying. You were locked out due to suspicious activity. The service is temporarily unavailable. We are experiencing technical difficulties. These messages are not lies. They are incomplete. They reflect the system's point of view, not the human one. From the system's view, something crossed a line. The exact cause may still be under investigation, but the response is already decided. Stop first, understand later. This ordering is intentional. Investigation is safer when the system is no longer changing. Recovery is cleaner when damage is contained. Restarting is only meaningful if the system can trust its own state again. None of this is about perfection. It is about control. Stopping is how software systems maintain it. And once you understand that, the shutdown no longer looks like chaos. It looks like enforcement. A rule applied without context, a boundary crossed without ceremony, a decision made long before the moment it affects you. The system did not break. It asserted a limit. What that limit protects and who absorbs the cost when it is enforced comes next. Part 2. The threshold. You never see. Most software systems are never simply on or off. They exist in a constant state of measurement. Every request is timed. Every response is checked. Every action is compared against what the system expects to be normal. This happens continuously, even when nothing feels wrong. Latency stretches by milliseconds. Error rates tick upward. Data arrives slightly out of order. A dependent service responds a little slower than usual. Individually, none of these signals matter. Together, they form a picture. Software does not wait for catastrophe to react. It watches for drift. How far the system is moving away from stable behavior. How quickly that movement is accelerating. How confident it can be in what it is seeing. Those judgments are not made by a person in the moment. They are made by rules written long before, based on assumptions about what the system can safely tolerate. Every system carries a map of acceptable behavior. Within that map, variation is normal. Outside it, risk grows quickly. The boundary between those two zones is the threshold. Most people never see it. There is no dashboard that announces when the system is approaching danger, no visible indicator that tolerance is narrowing. Everything continues to appear normal until the line is crossed. That crossing rarely looks dramatic. It might be a slightly higher error rate combined with a delayed response from a dependency. It might be inconsistent data between two systems that are supposed to agree. It might be authentication behaving unpredictably under load. None of these conditions are inherently fatal. What matters is their interaction. Software systems are built on trust between components. One service trusts another to respond correctly. One database trusts that writes are consistent. One security layer trusts that identity checks are reliable. When those trusts weaken, the system has to decide whether it can continue acting as if nothing has changed. That decision is encoded in thresholds. If error rates exceed a certain percentage, stop. If latency exceeds a defined window, stop. If data cannot be reconciled confidently, stop. These rules are blunt by design. They do not weigh context, they do not consider intent, they do not account for inconvenience. They exist to protect the system from making irreversible mistakes. The threshold is not about what happened. It is about what might happen next. This is where the system's priorities become visible. Accuracy over availability. Integrity over speed. Containment over continuity. Those priorities are not universal. Different systems choose different trade-offs. A streaming service might tolerate errors that a financial system cannot. A collaboration tool might degrade gracefully where a medical system must halt entirely. But every system chooses, and once those choices are encoded, they are enforced without negotiation. From the outside, this can feel arbitrary. One moment, everything works. The next moment, nothing does. People assume something broke, that a bug slipped through, that someone missed a warning sign. Often, none of that is true. The system saw exactly what it was designed to see. It simply reached a point where continuing was no longer safe. This is why shutdowns often feel disproportionate to the visible problem. The visible problem is not the trigger. The invisible risk is. Software systems are conservative in ways humans are not. They do not gamble on partial information. They do not assume things will resolve themselves. They act on thresholds precisely because waiting introduces uncertainty. Once a threshold is crossed, the response is immediate. There is no debate. No second opinion, no gradual easing into restriction. Access is revoked, transactions are blocked, services are paused. From the system's perspective, this is clarity. From the human perspective, it is shock. What makes this harder to understand is that thresholds are not fixed points. They move. Systems learn. Conditions change. Tolerance narrows or widens based on recent history. A system that has experienced instability recently may shut down sooner next time. A system under attack may lower thresholds preemptively. A system carrying more load may reduce its margin for error. These adjustments happen quietly. There is no announcement that tolerance has changed. No notice that the system is now more cautious than it was yesterday. The same action that worked last week may trigger a shutdown today. From the outside, this feels unfair. From the inside, it feels prudent. The threshold is not punishing behavior, it is responding to context. But context exists entirely within the system. Users cannot see it. They cannot predict it. They cannot adapt to it in real time. This is why shutdowns feel personal even when they are not. You did not do anything differently. You did not violate a rule you knew about. You did not receive a warning. The system simply reached a point where it could no longer trust itself. And when trust erodes, stopping is the safest action available. These thresholds are what allow modern systems to scale. Without them, software would continue operating until damage spread too far to undo. Recovery would be slower. Harm would be larger. Trust would be harder to rebuild. The threshold is the line that prevents that outcome. But like every line in a complex system, it creates sides. On one side, the system remains intact. On the other, people experience disruption. The system registers success. The people feel loss. The threshold has done its job. What it has also done is move the cost of protection outward, away from the system, toward the people who depend on it. That transfer is not the result of a single decision. It is the inevitable outcome of rules designed to protect integrity above all else. Once those rules fire, the system does not collapse. It continues to work, just not for everyone at the same time. That is where the next tension appears. When protection becomes disruption, and stopping one system quietly shuts down many others with it. Part 3. When protection becomes disruption. Software systems rarely stand alone. They are layered, interconnected, and dependent on one another in ways most people never see. One service relies on another for authentication. Another depends on shared data. A third assumes that both of those will respond correctly, on time, every time. Under normal conditions, these dependencies disappear into the background. Everything works, requests flow, responses arrive, the system feels seamless. But when a shutdown rule fires, that invisibility breaks. The system that stopped may have done so to protect itself. It may have acted correctly, even conservatively. But its decision does not remain contained. It travels. A service that cannot authenticate users prevents other services from functioning. A database that halts writes leaves downstream systems without state they can trust. A security layer that locks access freezes workflows far beyond its original boundary. None of these systems are broken. They are waiting for something upstream to return to a state they recognize as safe. From the outside, this feels like everything failed at once. In reality, one system stopped and the rest followed. Modern software is built for efficiency, not isolation. Shared services reduce cost and complexity. Centralized platforms make coordination possible at scale. They also create single points where protection becomes leverage. When a core system stops, it pulls others with it. This is why shutdowns often feel disproportionate. The original issue may be small, a mismatch in data, a spike in errors, an anomaly that would have gone unnoticed years ago. But because systems are tightly coupled, the response spreads quickly. What was once a local protection becomes a global interruption. This is not because engineers fail to anticipate dependency. It is because dependency is the price of scale. Systems that serve millions cannot afford to operate independently at every layer. They rely on shared truth, shared identity, shared timing. When any of those becomes unreliable, stopping is safer than guessing. The result is a kind of digital cascade. One service enforces its boundary, another cannot proceed without it. A third times out, waiting for both. Users experience a wall. From the system's perspective, this is containment working as designed. The damage did not spread invisibly. Inconsistent data was not written. Security was not compromised. Integrity was preserved. From the human perspective, everything simply stopped. Work disappears midstream. Access is revoked without warning. Processes freeze in place. People assume chaos. What they are seeing is coordination. This coordination is not negotiated in the moment. It is encoded ahead of time. Each system knows how to behave when something it depends on is no longer trustworthy. Stop! Wait! Protect your own state. These rules prevent deeper damage, but they also prevent partial progress. There is no safe way to let some work continue when the foundation beneath it is unstable. This is why graceful degradation is harder than it sounds. Letting a system partially function requires knowing exactly which parts are safe and which are not. In complex environments, that certainty rarely exists. So systems choose bluntness, all or nothing, on or off, available or unavailable. That clarity is a feature. It avoids ambiguity. but it also exports disruption. The cost of that disruption is not evenly shared. Some users are inconvenienced, others are halted entirely, some businesses pause operations. Others lose revenue they cannot recover. The system does not distinguish. It cannot. It only enforces rules. It understands. This is where responsibility becomes diffuse. No single team chose to shut everything down. No individual decided that work should stop across the organization. No one pressed a button thinking about downstream impact. The shutdown rule fired. Everything else followed. This diffusion makes disruption feel unaccountable. There is no person to blame. No obvious mistake. No decision to appeal. The system is behaving correctly according to its design. And that design prioritizes protection over continuity. In many cases, that trade is justified. The harm prevented by stopping is larger than the harm caused by disruption. The alternative would be silent corruption, security breaches, or failures that surface much later and are harder to repair. But justification does not erase consequence. For the people affected, the distinction between protection and failure is academic. What matters is that they cannot do what they need to do. They are locked out. They are delayed. They are waiting. And like waiting in other systems under strain, this waiting redistributes cost. Time is lost. Deadlines slip. Trust erodes. The system remains intact. The people absorb the friction. This pattern repeats across industries. A financial platform halts trading to prevent disorderly markets. A healthcare system freezes records to preserve accuracy. A logistics platform pauses routing to avoid compounding errors. Each decision is defensible. Each outcome is disruptive. And because these systems are embedded in daily life, the disruption feels personal even when it is structural. By the time services come back online, the system has succeeded. Data is clean. Integrity is preserved. Operations resume. But the cost has already been paid. Not by the system, by the people who were stopped while it protected itself. This is the tension at the heart of modern software. Stopping prevents invisible damage. It also creates visible harm. Where that harm lands and who is expected to absorb it is not accidental. It follows the same pattern seen in every system under pressure. The system survives by shifting disruption outward. That is where the next question appears. Not whether the shutdown was correct, but who carries the cost when it happens. Part 4. Who absorbs the cost? When software shuts down, the system experiences relief. Risk is contained. Integrity is preserved. Uncertainty stops spreading. From inside the system, the event is over almost as soon as it begins. Metrics stabilize. Alerts quiet. Engineers move into diagnosis and recovery. From the outside, the disruption has only just started. The cost of stopping does not disappear. It moves. It moves away from the system and toward the people who depend on it. That movement is not evenly distributed. Some users are barely affected. They notice a delay, refresh a page, wait a few minutes, and move on. Others lose access to essential tools. Their work halts. Transactions fail. Processes that depend on timing begin to unravel. The system does not see this difference. It does not know who is on a deadline, who is mid-procedure, who cannot afford delay. It only knows that continuing was unsafe, so the cost lands where it can. Often, that means it lands on the edges. Contractors who lose billable hours. Small businesses whose payments stall. Patients whose records are inaccessible. Workers whose tasks are time-sensitive and unrecoverable. The people most affected are rarely the ones most visible to the system. They are downstream, dependent, replaceable from the system's point of view. This is not a flaw in intent. It is a property of abstraction. Software systems operate by flattening context. They reduce complex human activity into signals they can act on. That abstraction makes scale possible. It also makes consequence invisible. When the system stops, it does not stop selectively. It stops completely, and when it restarts, it does not restore time. Work lost is not recovered. Deadlines missed do not reset. Trust, once shaken, does not automatically return. The cost accumulates quietly. People adapt. They build workarounds. They delay decisions. They duplicate effort to hedge against future shutdowns. These adaptations change behavior. Systems become less efficient as users anticipate failure. Redundancy increases. Manual checks multiply. Shadow processes emerge to avoid dependence on a single platform. From the system's perspective, this looks like resilience. From the human perspective, it is friction. Time once spent creating value is now spent managing uncertainty. The cost also accumulates psychologically. Unexpected shutdowns undermine confidence. People hesitate to rely on tools that might disappear without warning. They save obsessively. They document defensively. They keep backups, not because they expect failure, but because they cannot trust continuity. This erodes something harder to measure than uptime. It erodes ease. Systems that require constant vigilance feel heavier over time. They demand attention even when they are working. That attention is labor. And like all labor, it is unevenly distributed. People with power absorb disruption differently than people without it. An executive locked out of a system may wait comfortably. A frontline worker may be unable to complete required tasks. A large company may reroute operations. A small one may stall entirely. The system does not distinguish. It cannot. Its shutdown logic treats all users the same at the point of enforcement. But the consequences are not the same. This is how neutrality produces inequality, not through bias encoded in rules, but through uniform application of rules in unequal conditions. The shutdown is fair. The impact is not. Over time, patterns emerge. Certain users experience more disruption. Certain workflows are interrupted repeatedly. Certain organizations build costly redundancy just to survive. These patterns harden. People with resources adapt and insulate themselves. People without resources absorb the instability. The system continues to function. The cost becomes normalized. This normalization is the most dangerous part. When shutdowns are rare, they are treated as incidents. When they become familiar, they become expected. Responsibility shifts from the system to the user. You should have planned. You should have backed up. You should have anticipated failure. Resilience becomes an individual obligation rather than a system property. The system is absolved by design. This is not unique to software. It is how all systems behave when protection is prioritized over continuity. Hospitals manage capacity. Power grids shed load. Insurance platforms delay claims. Software is simply the most immediate expression. It stops instantly. It affects everyone at once. It leaves no ambiguity about who is excluded. The system remains intact. The people wait. And waiting has cost. It costs time. It costs trust. It costs opportunity. None of this appears in postmortems. Reports focus on root cause, remediation, and prevention. They measure success by how quickly the system recovered, not by how disruption propagated outward. From the system's perspective, recovery is binary. From the human perspective, it is cumulative. By the time the system restarts, the damage has already been distributed. The software did what it was designed to do. It protected itself. The question is not whether that protection was correct. The question is who consistently bears the burden when it happens, and whether a system that survives by exporting disruption can truly be called resilient. That question lingers long after access is restored. Part 5. When the system is still working. Most people never experience a software failure. They experience software doing exactly what it was designed to do. Systems remain secure. Data stays intact. Risk is contained. From the inside, this is success. The platform protected itself. The rules were enforced. The shutdown prevented something worse from happening. Nothing broke. And yet, something stopped. Work paused. Processes froze. Decisions were deferred. From the outside, the system did not feel resilient. It felt unavailable. That difference matters, because modern life depends on systems that rarely fail outright. Instead, they operate close to their limits, relying on rules designed to preserve stability when uncertainty appears. Those rules are not neutral in effect, even when they are neutral in design. They decide when continuity is sacrificed to protect integrity. They decide when access is paused to prevent escalation. They decide when stopping is safer than continuing. And once those decisions are automated, they happen faster than explanation. By the time users understand what occurred, the system has already moved on. Logs are written, incidents are closed, normal operation resumes. The system is still working. That is precisely the point. Like power grids shedding load or hospitals managing capacity, software systems do not collapse when stressed. They adapt. They enforce boundaries. They export disruption outward to preserve internal order. That adaptation keeps the system alive. It also ensures that some people will always absorb the cost of stability, not because they were chosen, but because they were downstream, closer to the edge, less buffered, more dependent on continuity. This is not a failure of engineering, it is the consequence of optimization. Systems optimized for scale protect themselves first. Continuity becomes conditional. Resilience is measured internally, while disruption accumulates externally. What feels like fairness inside the system often feels arbitrary outside it. What feels like protection feels like abandonment. Understanding this does not make shutdowns wrong. It does not mean rules should be removed or safeguards weakened, but it does change how we interpret what happens when everything stops. It reminds us that still working does not mean without cost. It means the cost has been moved. It means the system survived and someone else waited. Subscribe for long-form stories about how systems actually behave when they operate under pressure. Each episode of The Deciding Line follows the moment where protection replaces continuity, and ordinary rules quietly decide who carries the risk of keeping the system running.